Alright guys, it's time for what you've been waiting for quite a long time, and that is information on Mod 16, specifically the Cleric class. This video is going to give an overview of the Cleric class and explain all of its powers, feats, and so on and so forth, and hopefully this take is actually good because this is like the fourth time I've recorded this video and I haven't been able to get anything right. I think I just have too much information in my brain and I can't convert it into words properly, so hopefully this goes well. That being said, please remember that this information is only accurate as of March 1st. It's very possible that some of this stuff can evolve and change by the time that you're watching this video, and certainly before it goes live. So keep that in mind. If you haven't already, please hop over to the community tab of my channel and check out the schedule for all of my Mod 16 video releases. So first of all, we are going to talk about Paragons. There is no more Anointed Champion and no more Divine Oracle. You've got Arbiter, which is the DPS Paragon, as indicated by this handy little icon that's in the description of each of these now. Naturally, it has all the DPS related powers and stuff. And then you have Devout, which is the Healing Paragon. And of course it has all the healing powers and stuff. So that being said, we are going to start with Arbiter. But before we delve into the more specifics of the powers and stuff, we are going to talk about mechanics, because that is something really important that you need to understand before you start trying to play the new version of Cleric. The most important mechanic to understand is Scales of Judgment. Now, depending on what type of damage your powers deal, you will gain either Burning or Radiant Judgment. These stack up to 6 times, and you can only have one type active at a time, so either Radiant or Burning Judgment. If you switch from one to the other, your stacks of the first one will be eliminated and you will only focus on the second one. And you can use these scales in 2 ways. Firstly, you can use it to give your encounters and dailies additional effects, usually damage, or you can convert them into divinity using the other mechanic, Channel Divinity. This is the tab power, and it does not switch your stances anymore like it does on live. There's no more divine encounters and divine at-wills. All this does is channel your divinity. To do a brief demonstration of this, we're going to use the power Lance of Faith. And this deals radiant damage, and so it's going to increase your burning judgment each time you use it. It's kind of like a backwards thing. Radiant damage increases your burning judgment, and fire damage increases your radiant judgment. So, as you can see here, as we use Lance of Faith, we're gaining stacks of burning judgment. They float around your character just the same way as the empowered orbs used to do. I can either expend these by using a power that does fire damage, or I can convert these into divinity by holding tab for a couple of seconds. And you didn't see an effect there because my divinity meter is already full. You can see here on the side it caps out at 1000, and each power that you use has a certain divinity cost. So we're going to spend some divinity and use a Forge Master's Flame with 6 stacks of Burning Judgment. As you can see, it deals a ton of damage because Forge Master's Flame is really, really strong, but we'll get into that later on. Now we're going to cast it again just because we can a couple times, and then we're going to demonstrate Channel Divinity. So let's get some stacks of judgment, and then we're going to press tab for a couple seconds, and then there, we gain some divinity back. So those are the 2 ways that you can use judgment. Now that that's all taken care of, we can finally get into the powers and stuff that you've all been wanting to hear about. So without further ado, let's get started. As you can see, the power screen looks way different than before. It's a lot more compact, and honestly, it just is a lot nicer in my opinion. For all classes powers, you're going to have half of each type as universal powers that both Paragons have access to, and the other half is going to be Paragon-specific powers that only your chosen Paragon can access, except for dailies. Dailies is 3 and 2 because you can't divide 5 by 2. You can't have 2.5 dailies for a Paragon. That just doesn't make any sense. So the universal at-wills are Sacred Flame and Scattering Light. Sacred Flame is pretty much what you're used to, and it does perform the way you would expect. Scattering Light does also cast the way you would expect, but Scattering Light is basically a renamed version of Brand of the Sun. It has the same icon and everything, same cast animation, Now we've got Lance of Faith as a Paragon specific power. So only Arbiter Clerics can use Lance of Faith, which kinda sucks because I love Lance of Faith. But that's besides the point. Lance of Faith, it functions the same way on live as well. The only different at-will is Conflagrate. This is a totally new at-will with a relatively long cast time that deals fire damage to enemies in an AoE. As you can see, Conflagrate is an AoE attack that deals damage over time to enemies in the area. By the way, I apologize for any background noise. There's a lot of people in the Trade of Blades with me. I tried to find somewhere with target dummies that didn't have a lot of people, and I could not, so I just decided to say screw it and come back here. Next up is encounters. All of these encounters should be familiar to you by name and icon. None of that has been changed. However, the effects have been changed quite a lot. So we're going to start off. Sunburst is pretty much the same. That is one of the ones that actually stayed relatively close to how it was before. And as you can see, the tooltips are much nicer now. Gives you a cast time, a cooldown, and a divinity cost if needed. And then also it explains the magnitude, added effect, and the bonus you get from expending judgment on that power. So you've got Sunburst, Daunting Light, Bastion of Health, Divine Glow, and Geas. So Daunting Light had its radius increased. You can see that it's now much wider than it is in Mod 15, which is great because it was really small, and you had to use it in Divine Mode if you wanted to have a bigger radius. But this is a really nice larger radius, and it does pretty okay damage as well. Bastion of Health is a little bit different. You do aim it still, and it has a much faster cast time, at least from what I understand. And this does have a divinity cost, so that means that as long as you have divinity, you can keep using it over and over again. And now with a specific feat, you can basically have infinite bastions of health, but yeah. Now Divine Glow is one that was changed a lot. It no longer gives a damage buff, it no longer gives a damage resistance buff, it no longer gives you a nice little glowy effect on your character, and it no longer does damage. So now you're asking, well, what does it do then? Well, it reduces your threat by half and gives you a divinity regeneration buff that lasts for 12 seconds. In my opinion, this power is pretty underwhelming now. Like, you don't even glow. You can't call it Divine Glow if you don't even glow. What's up with that? But threat is something that's a lot more important in Mod 16. However, as a cleric, it's not gonna come up as something that you're gonna need to use, in my opinion. I personally have not done any group content yet. I'm gonna start doing that as soon as I start getting some of these videos out. But from my personal viewpoint right now, my mindset is that I'm probably not gonna need to use this power. Now we've got Geas. Geas decreases the target's damage dealt by 5%. It's important, I mention this because the sources of buffs and debuffs are extremely limited compared to Mod 15, so I'm going to point out everything that is a buff or a debuff in all of my videos, just so that you're aware of what does what now. Its cast is the same as live, and it has a magnitude 500 damage, so it does pretty okay damage. But it does have a pretty long cooldown, and so in my opinion, it's not worth using when you're soloing something. Now, Forge Masters is my favorite encounter of all time now, and that's because it does a ton of damage. It has a pretty large divinity cost, but it does magnitude 800 damage at base. And if you use stacks of Burning Judgment with it, each stack increases the magnitude by an additional 200 magnitude. So that's up to an additional 1200 magnitude if you use all six stacks of Judgment, which makes for a whopping 2000 magnitude encounter power. That's a lot of magnitude. I demonstrated that a little bit earlier in the video, but here it is again. The lovely Forge Master's Flame. It's so beautiful. Killing stuff is so beautiful. Now you've got Chains of Blazing Light. Now this was also changed too. It does not do damage anymore. All it does is restrain enemies and it lasts for 12 seconds. This is something I do not see any use for whenever you're soloing, unless you're like having trouble surviving and you just want to keep the enemies way over there so they don't come attack you. But other than that, I don't really personally see a use for it. That's what it looks like. It seems to have a longer-ish cast time, I think. And now you've got Searing Light. This is an AoE power that deals damage to enemies in a line in front of you. It has a sort of moderate divinity cost. It's not low, but it's not high either compared to Forge Masters, and its damage is pretty okay. The hard part is going to be keeping enemies in a line. In my personal opinion, I think that it should cast in a cone in front of you, because getting enemies to like line up like this is not something that you're actually going to see, because it doesn't go to the third, and oh, I guess it does. It just goes in a straight line, so like this second one right here is getting skipped. So I think the radius should be widened to at least be a small cone. That's my personal opinion. Now we've got Break the Spirit. This is actually sort of similar to Live. It deals damage, increases the target's damage taken from magical and projectile attacks by 10%. So this basically lowers their defenses to magical and projectile damage. Now, in case you weren't aware, in Mod 16 there are 3 types of damage: physical, magical, and projectile. And I'm sure you can figure out which classes deal which type of damage. But its cast is still the same. You still get that nice little shatter effect, which is one of my favorite visual effects in the game, just saying. And lastly, we've got Prophecy of Doom. This is similar to, if you're familiar with rogues, their old Shadow of Demise feat. Prophecy of Doom has the same attack rate, the same animation, I mean, and we're just going to demonstrate by dealing some damage to this target dummy and wait for it to expire. There's Prophecy of Doom there, so basically it takes 25% of the damage you deal, and then hits the enemy with it at the end of the duration. Now next up we have dailies. So the dailies that are universal are Guardian of Faith, Hallowed Ground, and Flame Strike. Flame Strike is pretty similar, it just does damage over time. Guardian of Faith I'm not going to bother demonstrating because it's pretty much the same. It stuns, does some magnitude damage, 2500 magnitude. However, Hallowed Ground is pretty different than before. It puts a small circle around you, reduces the damage taken by allies by 10%, and then heals allies within the circle. It lasts for 12 seconds, and the healing magnitude is 250. It looks a lot different than before. It's much smaller, and in my opinion, this sort of forces the sort of close combat. So something like an archer, ranger, which is not called archer anymore, but I can't think of what it's called at the moment. Somebody like that who likes to play ranged might have a harder time with that, because it basically requires that you be close to the target if you want to be in that circle. And then you've got Hammer of Fate, which functions the same as before. And then something called Celestial Prominence, which I will demonstrate in a minute. Now, Celestial Prominence is my favorite daily ever, sort of. You aim it around, and you place it down, and then if you wait until the circle becomes empowered, which you can tell when it starts glowing like this, you press the button again, and it disperses the energy and deals damage to everything in the radius, and also stuns them, it appears like. This goes along with this Critical Sun feat. However, I have not been able to get Celestial Prominence to crit in this build, so I'm not sure if I'm either extremely unlucky or it's bugged at the moment, but this feat is really great, assuming it works properly. And now, class features. The 4 universal class features are Blessed Action, Hallowed Armor, Pilgrim's Light, and Holy Fervor. So, for Blessed Action, you get a heal whenever you use a daily power. Hallowed Armor, you take 5% less damage from all sources. Pilgrim's Light, you deal 5% more damage when there's no allies nearby, so that's kind of a solo thing. Holy Fervor, you regenerate divinity 15% faster. And then the Paragon-specific class features, Foresight, whenever you use a daily power, your chance to crit is increased by 5%. That lasts for 20 seconds. Terrifying Insight, whenever you critically strike, you recover 5 divinity. Light of the Scales, whenever Channel Divinity consumes one of the types of judgment, the amount of divinity restored is increased by 10%. I love this class feature. This is my favorite one, just because I convert divinity a lot because I like to use encounters. I'm a little spoiled with the fast recovery we used to have, but I just love it. It gets me a lot of divinity, and I get to do damage and stuff. And lastly, Inquisitor's Benediction, your healing spells heal for 20% more. Now this is something I pointed out during playtesting. It doesn't make much sense for the final Paragon class feature to be, for the DPS Paragon, to be a healing related effect. To me, that just doesn't make much sense. This belongs in the other Paragon, and you should have something damage related in the Arbiter Paragon. And I suggested this, and they said, you're right, it doesn't make that much sense, but it hasn't gotten changed yet, and I don't know if it will, but that's just my opinion. Now lastly, we've got the feats. Well, I guess second to last, because I do have to talk about ability scores. Feats here, you've got 5 sets. There's no more 3 feat trees. You get to choose 5 feats from a set of 10, 1 in each pair. First off, Piercing Light or Light Speed. Piercing Light gives Lance of Faith a 10% chance to make your next Searing Light have a 100% crit chance. And now, with crit chance being capped at 50%, things that give you a 100% crit chance on something, not a bad choice. On the other hand, you can choose Scattering Light now has a 10% chance to make your next Daunting Light cast instantly. Now, we all know that Daunting Light's cast time can sometimes be a problem because enemies can just walk out of it by the time it casts, and then you're like, ugh, I missed! So, having an instant cast one could be helpful. Next pair we got here, Tipping Scales and Heavy Sun. So Tipping Scales makes Divine Glow generate a full stack of one of the types of Judgment as long as you have at least one charge of either. So basically, free Judgment as long as you already have Judgment. All the Judgment. Heavy Sun makes Sunburst no longer knock back enemies, which is cool if you're in groups, but it does build additional stacks of Burning Judgment for each target hit. So that's going to be pretty okay in a trash mob environment. Next, you've got Mendicant's Judgment, or Radiant Swordbreaker. So Mendicant's Judgment is my favorite feat in the game right now. Well, for Cleric, anyway. Bastion of Health grants 2 stacks of Divine Judgment for every ally healed. The other option is Radiant Swordbreaker, which causes Break the Spirit to make Geas last 6 seconds longer. Now, to demonstrate this Mendicant's Judgment, we are going to heal some people in this training room. So if you're by yourself and you have this feat slotted, you cast it on yourself and you gain 2 stacks of Divinity. But if you're in a group and you cast it, you gain 2 stacks for each ally you heal. So me, that person named Good Morning, and that person named Black User. That's a great name. And then you got 6 stacks of Divinity that you can convert really fast. So spamming, not necessarily spamming, but using a quick Bastion of Health when you need some Divinity to use something else is something that I make use of a lot in solo content, and I'm sure I could definitely make use of it in group content as well. Next pair, we've got Smoldering Light or Rising Light. So Smoldering, these two are pretty similar, but they just have different numbers in them. Whenever your Divinity is below 25%, your Divinity regen is increased by 33%, or when your Divinity is above 75%, your Divinity regen is increased by 33%. Personally, I don't see a reason to pick this one, because having Divinity over 75% is not something that you're really going to have all the time. Whereas below 25%, you're really like, oh my god, I need Divinity. So having faster Divinity regen whenever you have low Divinity makes a lot more sense to me. Now, did I say Divinity enough in that paragraph? I think I've said Divinity like 200 times in this video, probably. And then the last set of feats here, we've got Burning Patch or Critical Sun. So Burning Patch causes Flame Strike no longer apply a damage over time, and instead sets the location on fire, causes a forest fire, and deals some damage to enemies that enter, and it lasts 12 seconds. So basically you set more stuff on fire. And now, this other feat, Critical Sun, is tied for my favorite feat ever as for clerics, and it causes Celestial Prominence. Whenever you crit with Celestial Prominence, you can cast it again without spending any action points. And now remember, we're in a world where action points are a lot harder to come by now. The sources of action point gain are really low, few and far between, and there's no recovery. So anything that you can do to cast more dailies is really great. Now that's it for the power section. We are going to take a quick look at ability scores though. Ability scores are pretty different in Mod 16. There's no more primary or secondary ability scores. Instead, all the ability scores have the same effects across all classes, and then you just pick which ones that you need for your class and playstyle whenever you're building your character. So for me, personally, right now I have my 2 main ones as Intelligence and Charisma. Wisdom is not really as useful anymore. Of course, I still have a lot of it because my initial stat roll when I made my character was high Wisdom, and I'm also using a belt, I think, that increases Wisdom, but Intelligence gives you control bonus and magical damage boost. The damage boost doesn't display properly at the moment, but since I'm a cleric, I'm dealing magic damage, I am going to want Intelligence, especially as an Arbiter. And then Charisma, Recharge Speed, dun da da da, and Companion Stat Bonus. Both good things, plus there's some Recharge Speed in there, which, like I said earlier, no recovery. You're going to want as much Recharge Speed as you can get, especially as a cleric. Alright, that's it for Arbiter. Let's move on to Devout. This video is way longer than I thought it was going to be when I first came up with this idea, so I apologize. So Devout, I have not set up any feat distribution for Devout because I have not really messed around with Devout since I've been soloing a lot of stuff. However, I have taken a look at everything, of course. Since I already talked about the universal encounters, I'm just going to skip those because they're the same across both Paragons and only talk about the Devout specific powers this time. So, you've got Blessings of Battle and Soothing Light. Blessing of Battle increases your outgoing healing by 5% and it lasts for 12 seconds. However, it's an at-will, so you can freely refresh this effect. So basically, it's like a constant outgoing healing bonus if you have it slotted. Okay, so Soothing Light has basically the same animation as Cure Wounds, if you're familiar with Paladin. This is what it does. Basically, you're healing target ally or yourself. For the encounters, you've got Healing Word, Exaltation, Cleansing Light, Astral Shield, and Intercession. So Healing Word is basically a small heal over time. It has an initial heal and a heal over time, a small heal over time. So it basically functions the same as it does on live. Now Exaltation is different. There's no more key binding for Exaltation. It only increases your outgoing healing and damage by 20%. Now, this is something that I feel like belongs in the DPS Paragon as well, because that's 20% outgoing damage bonus. That's a lot, but it's in the Healing Paragon. To me, that doesn't make much sense, although I understand why the outgoing healing part is here, absolutely. The outgoing damage doesn't make a whole lot of sense on Devout. Anyway, it lasts for 8 seconds. And then you've got Cleansing Light. It has a moderate heal and then removes 1 negative condition. So that's like if you're poisoned or on fire or something, it puts it out. Next you've got Astral Shield, which I'm going to demonstrate Astral Shield because it is different. So Astral Shield is one power that I do not like at all. And that is because you cannot move or execute additional actions while you're channeling Astral Shield. So Astral Shield is basically like, oh crap, there's this really big hit coming, I better put up this shield. But yeah, what it does is it reduces the damage taken by the party members by 10%, and it also has a heal over time. So, if we're going to cast this, you aim it, you channel it, and then you can't move until the channeling is completed. Or you cancel it, one of the two. You can actually cast it when you're not standing in it, which is kind of awkward, because, you know, if you put it like over there, and you're like, oh, my party's over there, and then you're screwed because you can't move into it. I do not like this power at all. Probably my least favorite thing in the Devout Paragon. And then lastly, you've got Intercession. Now this is something that I personally did not even get a chance to look at when we were playtesting, because this was a recent change that was not in our most recently tested build. It was added just for this preview build that we didn't get to see beforehand. So basically all it is a single target, large magnitude heal that has a pretty long cooldown. So basically it's like your party member ran away from the group and they're dying and you're like, well, I guess I better save them. So you cast it on them, and a 1000 magnitude heal is a pretty large heal, so. And then they're like, okay, they're fine and I can go back to whatever I was doing. Next you've got Anointed Army and Guardian of Life for the dailies. So Anointed Army has the same effect as before in terms of visual, but there's only 3 orbs around it. It has a really large heal magnitude, and it lasts for 20 seconds. One thing that I forgot to mention is there is no Scales of Judgment for the Devout Cleric. So for demonstration purposes, we're going to cast Anointed Army, and that is what it looks like. You get 3 orbs, and it expires after 20 seconds, and basically whenever you fall below 50% health, you get a really large heal, 1200 magnitude. Or if they don't use those orbs, it gives you a heal whenever that expires. Now, Guardian of Life is pretty moderate healing magnitude, and it also grants a healing over time effect. Now, the specific class features are Divine Action. Whenever you use a daily power, restore 100 divinity. Deliverance, increase your healing by 5% whenever the target's health is below 25%. Hallowed Guide, increase healing by 5% when the target is within 15 feet. And Divine Lure, increase healing and damage dealt by a flat 1%. See, now this one also doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me to be in this Paragon, or really in general. It feels like a really small bonus, 1% bonus healing and damage. Whereas this one right here, you get 5% bonus damage when bonus healing whenever the target is really close to you. Like, that just seems really lackluster to be the final unlock that you have of class features. And the same goes for Arbiter as well. So I hope that the final class feature gets adjusted before it goes live. And now Feats. Feats are different between Paragons, so it's time to talk about healing related stuff. So first you got Sacred Bastion or Repeated Blessings. Sacred Bastion gives Sacred Flame a 5% chance to make your next Bastion of Health free. And then whenever you cast Bastion on a target affected by Healing Word, the effect of Healing Word is extended by 9 seconds. So basically it makes Healing Word last longer when you also have Bastion slotted, so that's nice as well. The next pair you've got either Enhanced Astral Shield or Extended Exaltation. So Enhanced Astral Shield reduces the divinity cost of channeling Astral Shield by 25%. Now personally, since I hate Astral Shield, I would never pick this because I don't ever plan on using Astral Shield, but if you do, there's that. And now you've got Extended Exaltation. Extend the duration of Exaltation, which is the 20% damage and healing buff, by the way, by 4 seconds. Reserve to Divinity or Wide Flare. So, this feat is probably going to be updated in the next build because this increases the radius of Warding Flare by 10, and there is no Warding Flare anymore. That was changed to Intercession. So, I don't know what it's going to be changed to, but that probably won't exist in the next build. The other one is decreasing the divinity cost of Daunting Light by 10%, which is a damage encounter, by the way. So instead of costing 180, it will cost 162, I think. Next pair, you've got Primed Divinity or Swift Prayer. So Primed Divinity, after you channel Divinity for 6 seconds, Divinity Regained is increased by 33% per tick. So, by the way, for Devout, whenever you want to restore Divinity, let's just spend some real quick. Whenever you want to restore Divinity as Devout, you have to hold tab, like so. And it's kind of awkward to me because you can't move during this. That's also something I really hate. So honestly, personal opinion here, I probably will not be playing Devout very much at the moment. At least the way it is right now, and probably the way it'll be when it goes live, because I don't expect a whole lot to change with the way the mechanics work at their base level. But I don't like the way the Devout plays. I love the way Arbiter plays, so I'm probably going to stick with the DPS Cleric personally, but the other one, you may now move while channeling Divinity, but your movement speed is reduced by half. And just for the sake of this video, we're going to select this feat and test it out. So, like, you're able to move. This one, this makes it a little more bearable, at least for the moving during Divinity problem, but it still doesn't take away my hate of Astral Shield. I wish there was a feat to let you able to move during Astral Shield, that'd be great. And then the last set of feats, Anointed Arms or Persistent Guardian. So now the last set of feats is something that always affects dailies, by the way. So Anointed Arms, Anointed Army now lasts half the time and heals for half as much, but increases allies' damage by 3%. This one's kind of meh, because you only get 3% bonus damage every, like, 2 minutes, or 1 minute, depending how quickly you can regenerate a daily. And it only lasts for 10 seconds in this case, because it lasts half as much. So 10 seconds every minute or 2. That's not very much. The other one is Persistent Guardian. After using Guardian of Fate, the Guardian remains for 12 seconds and heals wounded allies for 300 potency every few seconds, which should be Magnitude. They'll probably change that to say Magnitude at some point. That is it for Clerics. I'm pretty sure I covered everything in my list here. If you do have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the comments. I will try my best to answer them all. And let me know what you think about Cleric as well. Do you hate the way it is now? Do you love the way it is now? What's something that you would change? Actually, tell me what you like the most and what you like the least about Cleric in the comments. Thank you guys for watching, and please make sure to subscribe if you aren't already. I've got 19 other videos related to Mod 16 coming out in the next 10 days. 9 days at this point by the time you're watching this. So if you're interested in knowing more about Mod 16 and seeing demonstrations of other classes and other features of Mod 16, my channel is where you want to be. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!